And the immediate person involved in this is the head of the Northeast Air Defense Command, Griffith Air Force Base, Rome, New York, Colonel Marr. His name is his program, right? Norman S. Ullman. He's there to mar any effect. He said, I couldn't launch my planes all at once. He only had about 6 or 8 planes. He didn't have a lot of planes because they didn't send away, we'll see. Hey, how come you couldn't launch your planes? He said, well, if I launched all my planes at the same time, they'd all run out of fuel at the same time. This is not the spirit that won the Battle of Midway. And he also said, when he did launch his planes, did he send them to Washington? Anybody honest would have said, I got to protect Washington, because that's the issue of strategic decapitation, right? Because we got to protect Washington. Don't go chasing targets. Just stay over Washington and let them come to you. Instead, he sent his planes to defend an isolated quadrant of the Atlantic Ocean, about 100 miles offshore. So he didn't protect any city. He sent his planes out over the ocean. I think this conduct is not good. I think he's a suspect. Here's Dave Frasca. This is the Islamic Fundamentalism Bureau of the FBI. And he's sitting there, he's getting reports from Minneapolis and from Phoenix, Arizona, saying, there are these Arabs taking flight courses. What do we do? Well, what he did was take the reports and sit on them for several months. And he could have rolled up the patsies. Now, rolling up the patsies makes the operation impossible. Not because the patsies are going to do it, because they can't do it. But because if you don't have the patsies running around, how can you blame them? If all those 19 people were in penitentiaries, you couldn't then accuse them, although they actually did, in one case, try to do that. But you've got to have the patsies out at large, otherwise they can't escape them. Technicians, the third category. Remember, we've done patsies, we've done moles, and now we come to the technicians. Well, the War Office, the guys who gave Guy Fawkes and company the decayed corn powder. More recently, the CIA old boy network revolved around a guy called Theodore Shackley, sometimes known as the Gray Ghost. And they were deeply involved in Iran-Contra gun running and drug running, and he was once listed as a speechwriter for President Bush the Elder. Andrew Marshall, known as Yoda, I hope you know him, Rumsfeld's futurologist. His job was to imagine future attacks and make sure that there was defense. Well, in that case, he didn't do too well, did he? Very sinister figure. He's the head of the Pentagon's Office of Net Assessment. Somebody should come after him with the net. He's been around since the strangeloves of the 1950s. He was part of the Herman Kahn and related people in terms of thermonuclear war planning. And of course, if you're willing to contemplate 100 million dead in the first hour, 9/11 hardly exists. It's a pinprick. Then we always have to think about private military firms. Booz Allen Hamilton claims that they have tremendous centers. They can coordinate any operation, even at the largest level. I'm sure they have rooms filled with hundreds of computer consoles that could be used to coordinate a huge effort. A lot of 9/11 researchers say Cheney ran it. How could Cheney run it? Again, with the 5 heart attacks, 4 pacemakers, quadruple bypass, alcoholic habit, and the wife yapping in his ear, because Mrs. Cheney, of course, is a well-known ideologue. How about DynCorp? If it's not Booz Allen, maybe it's DynCorp, or maybe it's the infamous Blackwater. Because these companies all say, we can do anything up to and including thermonuclear war, they say. Well, if you want to see a good movie about moles, patsies, and technicians, this is the one, The Package. It's about a group of US and Soviet officers who want to assassinate Gorbachev in the late 80s to stop arms control. And you see the 3 levels. It's one of the very rare documents. I urge you to take a look at this if you can. Now, we mentioned the Londonistan question. Well, there was a Londonistan back in the 1840s. We have Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. He happens to be the King of Belgium, installed by the British. And he writes to his niece, Queen Victoria, and he complains. He says, look, in London you have a sort of menagerie, a zoo, of people like Kossuth, the Hungarian, Mazzini, Italian, Lagrange and Le Rouen, French, to let loose occasionally on the continent to render its quiet and prosperity impossible. Now that's Londonistan 150 or 160 years avant la lettre. And it simply means that if you have an empire and if you want to have operations, you've got to have patsy organizations headquartered in your country that you can deploy. And it didn't start with Al-Qaeda. Let's just look at some of this stuff. One of the people involved in this is Jeremy Bentham. He's one of the founders of this entire method. By the way, he copied from Paolo Sarpi. He copied from a different Venetian origin. Here we go. He copied from Gian Maria Ortes, a Venetian economist of the 1790s. So whatever you think you know about the hedonistic calculus of Bentham, original source, Gian Maria Ortes. Gian Maria Ortes is so obscure, there's no picture of him on the internet, and I don't even know if one exists. But that's the Venetian original. How about Malthus? Malthus also copied from Gian Maria Ortes. Ortes argued in 1790 that the carrying capacity of the world was 3 billion people. And basically all the other ideas of Malthus come from Ortes. So essentially the principal ideologue of the British Empire gets it all from a Venetian original, the principles of population. Now in this time, the main person, the main operative is Lord Palmerston, but he also operates with the help of other subcontractors, let us say. He's, of course, the inventor of Zionism. It's his idea to destabilize the Ottoman Empire by creating Israel. And the story is that he went to Lord Rothschild and he said, here, we want to send you to Palestine. And Lord Rothschild says, I want to see it in the House of Lords, not under some palm tree in Jerusalem. But Lord Palmerston carried the day. Let's look at Mazzini. Mazzini is a kind of bin Laden of long ago. He was demonized, right? Mazzini was a guy who was supposed to be drinking out of skulls, and he kept a stiletto on his desk so he could stick you and kill you if you said the wrong thing. And he was, of course, blowing people up. They tried to blow up Napoleon III of France. I don't know if this name, but in Italy, he's considered one of the founders of the country. But he was a British agent. He was a British agent and a terrorist working for the Admiralty. Here, Stansfeld. This guy was an official of the Admiralty, and you can practically find the checks, the canceled checks, that Stansfeld used to pay Mazzini. Stansfeld he supposedly was devoted to the unification of Italy. Disraeli, our friend from before, said, you are associating with the worst killers in Europe. And of course he did, and he ran them. Take another example, Urquhart. This guy is not well known either. Anybody ever hear of David Urquhart, Scottish, British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire? He brought the Turkish bath to England. He wanted to bring the harem, but they wouldn't let him. So he brought all this in. And he was the head of a newspaper, I think, called the Weekly People, or the People. And one of the main people working for this was Marx. So Marx is a sub-agent of the British Foreign Office. And I think that is substantially accurate. And I hope I can get the Marxists I want to get the Marxists riled up so they want to intervene in the discussion. What does Marx tell you? In 1850, 1860, 1870, the main issue in the world is really the British Empire, which is about to seize total control over the world, right? Attacking Mexico, attacking Russia, attacking China, attacking India even more than they had, and then attacking the US, the Civil War. But Marx, you look at Marx, there's nothing about that. What he tells you is, you better fight the bourgeoisie of your own country. The industrialists of your country, France, Germany, those are your enemies. And that's it. It's a recipe for destabilization of those countries. And I think the word on Marx is that he may not have known what he's doing, right? The question is he a dupe or an agent? Only a psychiatrist knows for sure. Right? But I think that is, it's a very important point. I'd be prepared to argue if we had time, that Machiavelli has a much better class analysis than Marx ever did. I think Marx is a dead weight around the neck of most movements today. Although I also welcome the presence of Marxists because they address important issues, but they get them all wrong. And in 9/11, the Marxists are not interested in 9/11 because they say all factors have to be purely objective. 9/11 is subjective. And I think subjective is a big, big deal because we're human